Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest headlines in the sport. Once again, myself and Mike Bohn are out here on Fight Island, Abu Dhabi, while we've got MMA Junkie Radio's gorgeous George Garcia and MMA Junkie's Danny Segura back in the U.S. So let's not mess around, guys. Let's get straight into it. And of course, Max Holloway turned in one of the absolute greatest single performances we've ever seen in UFC history with his absolute domination over Calvin Kattar here in Fight Island. It seems like Dana White is on board with giving Holloway the winner of a March 27th fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Brian Ortega. But is that the right fight to make for Max Holloway? I mean, certainly he's deserving of a title shot, but is there something maybe even more enticing out there, maybe bigger, something else? This guy's calling out KHABIB. He wants to do anything. He'll take anybody. He said sign up the legends. So what do you think, guys? Are there any other options that make more sense to you? Let's put 3 minutes on the clock and break it down. George, give it a go.
Wow, guys. It was a masterful performance for Max Holloway. And I know he said it at the end. Look, I'm going to stick around. If you need me, I'll sub. But that's just not the right call. The guy was in a war. And, yeah, it was pretty one-sided. But I still would rather have him just gear up for part 3 versus Alex Volkanovski, which I never thought I would say, at least not till 2022, because that usually doesn't happen. Once you go 0-2 against the champ, that's it. I mean, you really have to hope for a scenario like Ortega or somebody else taking out Volkanovski. Then you get to step up. We've seen it. That's been the history of the company. They just don't really go to that. But with a special performance like what Max Holloway did, how can you not? I mean, he does own the win over Ortega, so we know that if Ortega wins, I mean, that's not easy. That's not a hard fight to make. But it was Volkanovski. Even Volkanovski has to appreciate that. And the fact that fight number 2 was pretty dang close. I scored it for Max Holloway, and a lot of people did. Then I think it'll be a lot easier to sell. But he did everything he needed to do.
Yeah, history there for sure. And as you said, normally you don't get a third fight when you're 0-2 against a champ, but Max Holloway deserves anybody. What do you think, Mike Bohn? Is it the winner of that fight? Is that the right fight? Or do you see anything else out there?
No, this has got to be it. I mean, Max Holloway has proved with undeniable credibility that he is the number 1 contender there. In a lot of people's minds, he should still be the champion. He didn't lose that second fight to Volkanovski. So, yeah, you got to do that one a third time. I know, George, I agree with him. It's a completely rare scenario. UFC doesn't usually do this. You could lose 2 fights to the champion. It doesn't matter if they're both split decisions, but Max Holloway seems to be a very rare person in the circumstances. He's got obviously a lot of name value, a lot of big fan following. So I think it makes sense to do that, but definitely don't write Brian Ortega off from winning this fight too. I think that is entirely possible. And then Max Holloway is in a gravy scenario. We all saw what happened there in that first fight with Ortega. It was utter domination, somewhat similar to this fight against Kattar, if not more brutal in that sense. So yeah, if Ortega wins, you definitely do that rematch with Holloway challenging. If Volkanovski wins, I think you got to go to that third fight because there's a lot of appeal for it and a lot of fan demand.
Yeah, important to point out. I don't think anybody's counting T-City out of that fight, but it's nice to know you can go either way. What about you, Danny Segura? I mean, this is certainly the natural order of things, but you got any creative ideas to throw out there at Max Holloway?
I mean, it's got to be a title fight, right? I mean, he proved that he is the best featherweight, not being the champion in that division, right? And usually the best featherweight fights the champion. So it's got to be a title fight next, whether Brian Ortega wins or Alexander Volkanovski wins. I agree with Mike. He's in one of these rare scenarios where, he is 0-2 against the champion. And usually that's a nightmare scenario for any fighter. And that usually causes fighters to move up weight classes or move down, abandon just entire divisions. But look, this is a scenario where we saw clearly an improved Max Holloway. And I think it's a scenario that helped everybody out. Not only did Max Holloway look amazing and changed perception around what's possible and how high he can go in skill here in mixed martial arts, but also Volkanovski looks pretty damn good now, knowing what Max Holloway is capable of doing, right? So I think it's a win-win for everybody. And yes, the title fight should come next.
Can't believe nobody's thinking about the name Conor McGregor. What about that one? I wouldn't mind seeing those guys hook it up again at some point as well. So, I don't know. Options on the table. I'll tell you the main option, though. Pay attention to the clock, Danny Segura. There was only 3 minutes there. KHABIB Nurmagomedov is back. Sort of, right? UFC President Dana White seems to think KHABIB is an absolute lock to come back for one more and try to go 30-0. But to me, I don't know. It sounded more like a maybe. Like, we're going to pay attention and see what happens. So what do you guys think? I mean, is there a scenario that absolutely gets KHABIB's attention, right? He's going to pay attention and see if anything excites him this week. Is there a scenario that you see really getting him excited after UFC 257? Or is he done? Let's play a little speed round on this. Let's put 2 minutes on the clock. Have at it, George.
Yeah, man. Listen, I just take it as when he mentioned Charles Oliveira, because he said something special has to happen. Something special did happen. Charles Oliveira beat Tony Ferguson pretty decisively. Ferguson was that long-time Khabib rival, and so when he mentioned him, to me, he was setting notice that if I do come back, so far it's looking like Oliveira, and the 4 guys that are fighting this Saturday at the pay-per-view, they better do something special. And by that, obviously, you want to just ice somebody.
Mike, 5 potential names on the table. Any scenario stand out to you that gets Khabib's attention?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, I think he's kind of done it all in the lightweight division. Yeah, he hasn't fought all these guys, but I don't think any of those names really interest him a ton. I mean, if Conor McGregor goes out there and sparks Dustin Poirier again, the UFC is going to push really hard for that fight, but I don't think he necessarily wants it. I don't see why he wants to reward Conor McGregor with that rematch. I think he thinks that he's been there, done that, and beat Conor McGregor cleanly. Why would he give Conor the chance to get that one back and then potentially maybe like set up a trilogy or ruin his undefeated record? Just doesn't make sense to me. I still think the fight that exists out there, if Khabib is going to come back, it's got to be George St. Pierre. And I know Dana White said that fight's kind of dead. George St. Pierre isn't interested. Khabib isn't interested. I actually saw Khabib walking around the Fighter Hotel today, and he talked to the Schmo briefly, and he revealed that he's been exchanging some text messages or DMs with George St. Pierre, and they said, I'm waiting for you to come back. So I think that fight is still of massive appeal to Khabib. He really wants it, and I think that's really the only one that's going to bring him out. I don't really care what Poirier, what McGregor, what Hooker, what Chandler, and then of course Oliveira's great run is there. I don't think any of those are just going to really make him rise out of his seat and jump to come back. I think in the lightweight division, he's done it all. The dad's wish was to go 30-0 against George St. Pierre. I don't think he does it unless that is the scenario that plays out.
Very, very interesting, man. I think you're right. I mean, the biggest money fight is Conor McGregor, right? But I don't think he wants it. I love, stylistically, the Charles Oliveira fight, but I don't know if the name's big enough. So I guess we're just going to have to see what happens at UFC 257. And guys, it is the first pay-per-view of the year, UFC 257. It's lined up for this weekend. And we touched on it. The biggest star in the sport, Conor McGregor. He's lined up for a rematch against Dustin Poirier. This was done, of course, in less than 2 minutes the first time around, but that's been several years. It's a different weight class. Guys have matured. It's a lot different fight now, I think. So what do we see happening here? Let's give us some keys to victory and how this thing plays out. We'll put 3 minutes on the clock to give you a little time to break it down. Danny Segura, let's start with you.
So I think it's very interesting. I recently spoke to Dustin Poirier's coach, Mike Bohn, and he actually had a lot of interesting points to say. You can check that out on MMAJunkie.com. And one of them was being how much durable Dustin Poirier is at 145. I mean, 155, then 145. Remember, the first time they fought, it was, 10 pounds south at featherweight. And I got to agree with that. I mean, we saw him, have some rough fights at 145 pounds. And ever since he went up to 155, he's just had amazing performances, and he's been hard to put away. And he's fought some killers. Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker. I mean, you just got to go down the list. So I don't think Conor McGregor is going to get him out that easy, keeping that in mind. And also, look, a big thing that was going into that fight was that Conor McGregor at that time in his rise, it was a very quick rise at featherweight and also a very unknown. People weren't really sure what they were getting themselves into when getting ready for a Conor McGregor fight. And at this point, they know exactly what to face when meet with the challenge of Conor McGregor. So I think it's a much more different situation, and I expect a much more durable Poirier, smarter, more experienced, more poised. I don't know. I'm going with Poirier in this one.
Interesting. All right. So leaning on the durability there, I think that's certainly going to play in. Familiarity as well, right? I mean, you're used to the circus that Conor McGregor brings surrounding him. So, George, what do you think? Is this a different fight? How's this going to play out?
Very different. Both guys are very much more experienced, especially Dustin Poirier. He's been through a lot and then accomplished one of his goals, which was to be a world champion. But basically, it's something you're going to hear a lot this week. You got to get out of that first round. I mean, Conor McGregor retains a lot of power regardless of what round you're in. That guy's just got heavy hands naturally. However, it does diminish a little bit as it goes on, just like any other fighter. So that's the key, is not letting this guy get off to a quick start. Yeah, in that early round, that's when Conor's throwing his kicks. That's when he's throwing his hardest. He's got to get out of that first round and just take him into deeper waters, like you'll always hear.
Yeah, avoid that big left hand, right? That's the one that puts everybody out. Mike, what do you think? Is Dustin Poirier going to be able to do that, though? That is a dangerous weapon, or is this Conor McGregor's night?
Yeah, well, I think Dustin knows what he needs to do. I just had the chance to speak with him out here not that long ago. You can watch that interview on our YouTube and go to MMA Junkie. And he's very aware that Conor has serious power early in this fight, and he wants a blood and guts type of fight. That was his quote. He knows that the longer it goes, the more advantageous it is in his favor. He's shown that he can go 5 rounds hard and really keep up that pace and even pick up the pace later in the fight. Conor McGregor hasn't really showed that. The Nate Diaz fight was really the only indication, the second one, and some people could say that he should have lost that decision. So I think the longer this goes, it's Poirier's big chance, and if it ends early, Conor McGregor is almost certainly going to be the one getting his hand raised.
Boy, I can't wait to see it. I mean, we like to see Conor McGregor do the spectacular, right? But a test between these two guys, a real extended battle, sure would be a lot of fun to watch. So we'll see how it goes. Guys, we've been waiting for Nate Diaz to get back to action for more of the year, and it seems like the UFC is working on getting something done with him now. UFC President Dana White said they're looking at a lightweight fight for him. So nail it down. What are we going to see? Who's this matchup going to be? 2 minutes. Let's start with you, Danny Segura.
I know this is a bit out of left field, but look, I think Max Holloway is the fight to make. Obviously, he's fought at 155 before against Dustin Poirier, who's, won an interim title that night and obviously proven to be one of the very best lightweights today. So no shame in losing to Dustin Poirier. And look, I think he learned a lot from his run at 155. So I think a second time out, he would do much better, right? And I think this is the perfect opportunity to build even a bigger star. We know that Max Holloway has a lot of star potential, but he's not really there on that level of Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz probably doesn't have too many years left. So why not do a little bit of star power transfer, right? I mean, we know that 145 title is being disputed, in March. That's a long time, right? Max Holloway wants to get in the cage this weekend. So why not make that Nate Diaz fight as sort of a busy fight, prop his star power up. And look, it's a 155. It's not going to mess up his run at 145 and his spot for being next for the title. So all in on Nate Diaz versus Max Holloway fight. Plus, the output on that fight would be ridiculous. Sign me up.
Gotta be honest, man. I don't hate that idea at all. I mean, he's been a champion before. Not that it wouldn't be great to get back there, but a money fight for Max Holloway like Nate Diaz, I like it. George, you sold on that idea, or you seen another matchup come together?
Man, of course I'd love to watch it, but I think Max can be fighting for a title, International Fight Week of 2021. I like NorCal versus SoCal. Give me Tony Ferguson versus Nate Diaz. These guys can talk it up, and I think they can sell it on, the Cali BMF.
Sure would be a lot of fun. Mike, what about you? Anything come together for you for Nate Diaz?
I don't think Nate is going to be super picky here. I think, talking to some people close to him, he knows that he's the A side of most of these fights. He knows that he's the draw, and I think maybe sometimes people forget about that. He knows what he's worth, and I think he's going to go in there and fight anyone that kind of makes sense for him. And to me, that's Justin Gaethje. Dana White kind of hinted to our Farhanin that might be the fight when they spoke, and I think that's the one we ultimately get.
I think that's the leading candidate right now as well. And it's not a bad one, but I like all those options you guys put on the table for sure. Well, guys, lastly, John Jones is looking absolutely jacked as he continues his move up towards a heavyweight debut. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little skeptical at first of how he would, transition to the heavier weight class. Was that game going to carry over? But right now, man, it looks like he's going to be an absolute monster when he steps in there. So with the little sneak preview that he's given to us of his physique, let me know, how do you predict he's going to do at heavyweight? Can he be the same dominant force that he's obviously been for so long at light heavyweight? Let's put 2 minutes on the clock. Let's start with you, Danny.
Yeah, there's a lot of big questions. Obviously, he's doing things right. We've seen a lot of light heavyweights before just quickly do a fight at heavyweight because, hey, I'm going to cut any weight. I'm just going to weigh in at 240, whatever the case may be. But we know that heavyweight is just a different size. It's just different. It's not really about the weight. You got to build onto your frame. And John Jones is being very smart in doing that. So I love the way he's handling about this. And look, he's probably the greatest of all time, right? He's definitely up there. Certainly the greatest light heavyweight to have ever existed in this sport. So I think he's going to do just fine at heavyweight, I think, but I'm very curious. So, that's why we're doing this, right? So I'm all in on this heavyweight run, and I think he'll do quite well. I mean, I expect nothing but greatness from John Jones, so he'll be holding gold up there, I think.
Yeah, it's intriguing, man. He might have to change his nickname from Bones to Meat, man. He's packing it on there. George, what do you think? Is this guy going to be a force at heavyweight?
Yeah, he's going to be a force regardless of what weight class he were to fight in because he's just a tremendous natural talent. However, I'll remind you, when he did fight OSP. I believe it was after that run of getting jacked. He came back and he was a little sluggish and slower, so he has to make sure he doesn't lose a little bit of that speed advantage he's going to have over these big guys, because he's not going to have the power advantage. So you got to retain something. Hopefully he used that fight to learn from.
Mike, what about you? I mean, obviously he's been a force at 205. Can he do the same at heavyweight? What are you thinking?
It's an interesting time for him to go up here. I mean, like, if Francis Ngannou wins this championship fight against Stipe Miocic, he's going to be taking on the heavyweight of the heavyweights, someone who has incredible power, who is as big as it gets for the division. So I think that's really compelling, and maybe could be to John Jones's detriment. But the speed factor on him, the kind of well-roundedness of his game, I think that's going to be very good for him at heavyweight. I think both these fights are going to be, whether it's Stipe or Ngannou, are going to be really tough for him. And I think John Jones will do well, but I can't say with certainty he's going to win that championship the first time out.
He wants to push himself. It looks like he's doing it. It's going to be exciting. I mean, the guy's been absolutely just dominating his peers at light heavyweight. So got to respect the fact that he's willing to take a test. Like you said, against two very, very scary guys up there at the top of the division. So excited to see what happens with John Jones. And, of course, excited to see what happens here as we conclude everything out here on Fight Island. Not one, but two UFC events this week. I'm sure there'll be plenty of headlines coming out of it. We'll talk about it all next week on Spinning Back Clique.